AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Hey everybody, welcome to AutoLine After Hours, last show of 2023, but boy, it's going to be a great one. Why? Because of the guests that we have on here. Gary's not here with us today, but Sandy Munro is in the house.
Yay!
He's back.
Good.
And we got Joe White from Reuters and Tu Lee from Sino Auto Insights. And guys, I know this is going to be a good conversation. Who knows where we're going to go with this?
No
But Sandy, I wanted to ask you about the Cybertruck because you were down in Austin. You got to talk to Elon, the man himself.
Yeah.
But the one that I really watched, in fact, I took notes on your video when you had what it was like 6 or 7 of the top execs
5.
there.
Yeah.
5? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to embellish. See,
Oh,
I'm trying to make it sound better.
sorry. Oh,
all
sorry.
of them.
Oh,
Basically
okay,
all
so
of
this
them.
means we can all lie. Okay, that's good.
So that was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
But here's my question to kick off the conversation. How many of these things, once they get up to line speed, it's going to, I mean, Elon has said what? It's going to be a year and a half before things are really humming. What do you think their sales rate's going to be at that point?
I know what they've got in sales. It's published all over the place that they've got 1 million pre-orders. That's a big chunk.
All non-refundable, right?
well,
So when
yeah.
the time comes, and they just changed it. You want to spec one out? You want to configure it?
Yeah.
$1,000. That's
Yeah.
going to get rid of a lot of riffraff.
Right. And a lot of the riffraff is they're getting rid of them right now because, okay, some of these guys, they put in their money for their new product, and it's not $47,000 anymore. Now it's $100,000 plus. So
Well, it depends on the model,
growing.
right? 60,000, I think, is what they're launching with. Isn't it a little over
Well,
60 grand?
Yeah, I know, but they're not making those right now.
Oh,
So if you if
Launching
you
at
put
80,
in, you
90.
wanted to have
The mid-range, I think.
yeah. But the one that they're building is the Founders Edition or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's coming in at over $100,000. So that's gonna weed people out in a hurry. And right now, we've had quite a number of people saying, you can buy my truck.
Yeah.
They want extra money and things like that. And I'm not really interested in scabbing because I want to keep I don't have them as a customer. Tesla's not a customer of ours, but I don't want to have any issues with the folks at Tesla. So I'm holding back. I used to have a lot. Now I don't have so many because little things that happen in my company. But at the end of the day, I got one for sure. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed on it.
I told you, when you get a Cybertruck, you got to invite me over to drive this thing.
Yeah. Well,
Before he tears it apart.
Yeah, before he rips the pieces. That's right.
Before it's ripped to shreds.
But wait a minute.
We're
So
gonna-
what do you think?
Well,
What do you think they're
well,
going to sell, Cybertruck?
Well, I have no idea. And this is Sandy. This is what I wanted to ask you about because you did a couple of videos, and one that John you referenced with the engineers, but others as well. And I think there's a couple of things I want to ask you about this thing. I mean, what's your take on the buildability of the truck itself? Because it's challenging, right? It's a novel throughout.
It's novel, but it's not that big a challenge. They've solved most of the stuff that I couldn't figure out how they were gonna do what they wanted to do.
They have a 6,000-pound press and a 9,000-pound press, basically.
Oh, that's for the casting.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. So let me.
But there's more. That's relative. Once you tune those in, they'll squirt parts out all day long,
Right.
and there's very, very little that they have to do. They're taking the rough shapes and putting in inserts, and I mean, that's faster than I can drill and tap and whatnot. It's a little.
But I
bit
think
more
you're talking
expensive.
about the body, right?
Well, there was that, but I'll
body.
also ask this. My colleagues at Reuters, Paul Leinert and Nori Schrozer, had a story today about troubles with batteries. I think some other outlets are coming up with similar stories. So, what if anything did you see on the 4680 batteries, and what can you say about how that process seems to be going?
Well, I saw the 4680 battery lines and the dry cell batteries. I was right there. I was watching them coiling up the anodes and the cathodes. They were right in front of me, and quite frankly, I looked for powder. I looked for all the things that I should see if there's any kind of an issue, and I saw nothing. So they were cranking them out on the short lines, the ones that don't have solvent in it, you don't have to reclaim that solvent. So instead of having a line that long, I got one this long. So I watched all these things. I didn't see huge boxes of scrap parts. So from what I saw, this thing looks like it's a go. However, shit happens. And when somebody comes along and gives you, say, some new grade of lithium or some new copper that's a little bit different, then the shit can hit the fan. It's like anything else. If a purchasing agent comes in and says, "Oh, look at this! I can save $10 on a reel of steel," and I bring it in and I'm uncoiling it and whatnot, I'm looking, well, whoa, where did this come from? Oh, that looks like a flaw. Yikes! But it's too late. It's already in the presses now. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Everything's sprung all over the place. Purchasing agents have a lot more influence over the quality of the product than almost anybody. If they save money, which is their job, and you can't stamp it, you're screwed. And that's kind of like what could be going on with the because I did hear about the batteries. But what I saw, I didn't see the issue.
But this is going to create next level challenges, right? Because if the Model 2 comes out by 2025, we're talking much more than 250,000 units, which Cybertruck is supposed to have an annual capacity for.
I don't think the Model 2 will have anything close. That'll come out with LFPs. I mean, there's no reason for rocket ship. I want distance and I want cheap. I'm not gonna suggest for a minute that'll be lithium ion batteries. I just don't think that'll happen.
I think they go with LFP.
Yeah.
So another question, and it's kind of a variant of the earlier one. So as you're looking at this Cybertruck, I mean, it seemed like they use this as a technology kind of future technology test bed. I mean, it's a pretty big test bed, but it's a test bed. Yeah. But as you look at the technology that you saw, I mean, the way the body's constructed or the electrical architecture, the 48-volt electrical architecture, what of that do you think is significant in that it's going to be scalable and deployable across Tesla, as opposed to not just for the Cybertruck, but something that you think they can scale? I mean, that electrical system, or do you think there's some other aspects of it?
I think number one on the hit parade, 48 volts. But more importantly is the Ethernet ring that they've got for communication. That got rid of 71% of the weight and probably the cost associated with all those wires. Yeah. People were asking me about it, and whatnot. So I was going to bring okay, this is what you'd see for 12 volt and here's what you'd see, but it's too small. So I took big cables, and it's just basically give me that big cable over there, big in diameter. And then give me one that's a quarter the size, because that's what it is. It's 4-to-1. Yeah. So, my 12 volt thing isn't anything like my 48 volt. So it's just all you do is multiply amps and volts, and that's what I get in the way of power. Well, if I've got 48 volts, I only need 2 amps. But if I got 12, it's just a math problem, and people don't quite get it. That is revolutionary. That is going to give you some real good bottom line results. And then, so that would be, and then, I mean, I looked at all of the stuff that they can do with the Ethernet communication system. This blows everything away. Now I got my Ethernet connection, one connection, and I got a power line to anything. I don't care what it is. Is it a speaker? I don't care. Is it a window regulator? I don't care. Is it the door latches? I don't care. Everything now, and it communicates fast.
So what are you talking about? That sounds, what is that in a per car? Like hundreds of dollars a car, thousands of dollars per car? What would you guess?
Could be well, it depends on how much you got driving and whatnot, but I would guess somewhere around $1,000.
Whew, that's a lot of money.
Labor and material, right?
Everything all rolled up.
Okay,
at least
that's not small.
No,
Joe, I equate these hard knocks that manufacturing hell that they're going through is kind of similar to what Apple does with their enclosures, because everything that they do is a one-off when it starts. So the suppliers that they use get a lot stronger, get a lot smarter, and in Tesla's case, much larger case scenarios, but Apple's designing their own enclosures and fixtures and tooling, and this is similar to Tesla. So I think it's as much about how much of a disadvantage the legacies are, versus how much more advanced.
I was thinking about this today, which tells you something about me, that I would think about product cycles as I'm walking to the grocery store. But again, it was when I was watching the videos of the Cybertruck and the point you made, I was wondering, okay, so how far behind are the legacy automakers? Are they two cycles behind, 3, 1?
I can't tell you, but I know one thing for sure. Taking 48 volts and retroing it into something else, that would not happen at a legacy auto manufacturer, and I don't think it's going to happen at Tesla either. If they're going to do something on the 3, it would have to be a new 3.
They'd have to redo the entire car.
There's so many different things.
All the components change, right? All the electrical components
pretty much
change.
Everything goes to 48 volts. Now you can put, you can put little transformers and whatever, but at the end of the day, you'd really want to do it right the first time, and you wouldn't want to have anything that, well, it's a 12 volt camera, so we're just gonna, we'll put a little box in between that and the 48 volts, and we'll down come in it. No, that just isn't. That's not.
Adding boxes seems to defeat.
No, adding boxes is what Tesla doesn't do.
Right.
They get rid of boxes.
And the other part we haven't even spoke about is new components. Not even talking about software yet, right?
Yeah.
So Tesla is way ahead of everybody, with the
10
exception of China EV Inc.
So you'd say 10 years,
on hardware and software.
Yeah, China's we'll come to China, right, John?
Well,
Yeah,
I'm talking about.
we can jump into it anytime, but yeah, I mean,
I'm telling you right now that Tesla is at least 8 years ahead of everybody else on 48 volts. And the reason for that is because nobody's looked at it. It's always been the same thing. When I was at Ford 35 years ago, we were trying to get people to go to 42 then, but 48 volts. And guess what? Oh, that'll never work. There are no suppliers. Well, there are suppliers, but they didn't want to use them because we got a long-term contract with Fred here, and he gives us a good price. And so that's what was the killer there. Nobody wanted to look at weight reduction. What do you need? We're putting big V8s in these things. We don't. So at the end of the day, you're looking at a really huge mindset differential. And by the way, that 48 also helps something else. Oh yeah, steer by wire.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I'm telling you what, 48 volts, the Ethernet, steer by wire, and rear steer. Okay, so I brought the Lightning with me, and I drove the Cybertruck for about 2.5 hours. You can get it doesn't take long to get happy about a car that usually takes like the same radius as the Queen Mary to turn, and all of a sudden now, whoa, it wakes you up because it cuts in so quickly. And I noticed that when today I drove, like I say, I drove the Lightning down, and the turning radius is dramatic when you're in the
because the Cybertruck isn't it about the same length as an F-50?
It is. It's exactly.
I haven't seen one in the flesh, so
the rear wheel.
The rear wheel.
Yeah, the rear wheels turn, right?
But it's only like
Silverado
10 degrees.
EVs got that too. Hummer EVs got that too. A lot of cars have got rear steering. Some more aggressive than others. It's great for super high speed stuff, but it's especially good in parking lots when the wheels go into contraphase.
I'm telling you, that's where it really sings. And the steer by wire, I know others have tried it and whatever, but to have this, the Cybertruck to me, and I realize that this is going to sound goofy, but the Cybertruck to me is the BMW i3 of our time. The BMW i3, I was totally blown away with. New materials, carbon fiber, new welding techniques, new casting materials, so that you could actually weld a casting to an extrusion. I mean, holy shit, onsets, all these wonderful new just a hideous car, but actually
that's funny because I went
to some might say the same thing about the Cybertruck.
I went to the i3 factory. I had exactly, at a much less sort of informed level, I had exactly the same reaction that you did, and then the thing didn't sell. I was like, oh well, I guess that's it for that.
No, it didn't look like a BMW.
It didn't look like a BMW.
They had the fake grille and they had the badge, but that was the end of it.
Yeah,
in terms of looking like a BMW.
Nothing in the world looks as terrible is that thing?
Well, the current BMWs don't look like BMW. If you're
No, they
talking
don't
about
either.
the front
Yeah, you're
grill,
right.
but
Yeah.
we're talking about
What
the
you
front
mean,
grill,
what front
right?
grill? You
But
mean
you-
that
so-
great big? Holy
But Sandy,
shit!
so this 48 volt thing, and I listened to the video you did with the engineer. Even the Tesla engineers are like, this is hard because you got to change your entire supply base for almost anything that's in the vehicle. That it has got to make that shift and retool and recalibrate and new software. So I'm wondering, is the Cybertruck enough? Do you think it's enough to push the rest of the industry? Because if you're saving $1,000 a car, you'd think everyone else in the industry would look at that and say, okay, fine, if that's the benchmark, that's what we ought to be doing.
Well, here's the thing. As you probably know, the guys at Tesla sent out, here's how to design for 48 volts. And we copied down everything. We have the manual, and then we have every one of the different supplemental thingies, all the addendums and whatnot. We've got it, and it's a fairly thick package if you print it. And it's got everything you need to know. When I said I thought they're about 8 years behind, it should be 10 years because it would take 2 years to write that book.
Just to read it. And Joe, you have to remember that most of the rank and file management engineers at these legacies, they don't have the capability to move over to 48 volt, right? So it would literally having to be hiring entire engineering departments at these companies to really reinvent that kind of stuff.
I know
you got to have leadership. Let's face it.
Right.
And you're not going to get that out of GM. Volkswagen is just hoping to make it till next week. You're not going to get. Toyota thinks about stuff for a long, long time. Farley, first guy with a truck that was electric. Farley, first guy to say, "Hey, I'm going. I don't give a shit about that SAE thing. I'm going with the national standard." Yeah. So. He's the one who probably won't. He'll go in and say, "Hey, all my Ford guys that working for me, I got this manual, clunk. Yeah, I want you guys working on it as fast as possible."
The Ford's challenge is designing a profitable car that's not called F-150.
Well,
right?
here's the thing. I don't know enough about everything, but I do know one thing: the profitability. We look at when we do a tear down and analyze a car, we don't look at, what was the investment, what are the negotiations and stuff like that. We just tear the car apart and we look at it and we come back with numbers, and those numbers tell us whether or not, their gross profit is good enough to stay in, alive. And quite frankly, our numbers say that the F-150, the Lightning, they've got money that they can take out of it, no question about it. However, they're not that bad. They're not that off track. So why is it that everybody says this? Well, because, what is it? If it bleeds, it reads, or something like that.
If it bleeds, it leads.
It leads. Oh, sorry.
That's the lead story if there's blood all over the place.
Okay, good. So at the end of the day, I believe what they're doing is they're taking the investment costs and they're rolling it in. So I made a huge mistake one time, and I don't remember which group that I was with. They said, when the Chevy Bolt first came out, they said, "Is this a profitable vehicle?" And I said, "I don't know. We'd have to, there's a lot of calculations here. We've torn it apart. We looked at this, and this. Most of the stuff is already optimized for a gasoline vehicle. And they're adding this, and this, and really the only thing that'd be more expensive would be the battery itself." Well, then they came back and they said, "Well, what about the investment? How do you roll that in?" I said, "Well, investment's different. I don't usually include that." "Well, what happens if you did?" "I'd have to get back to you. This will take me a while." I came back and he said, "Well, how much? What would the car have to cost in order to get payback in a year?" Okay, so that would be, instead of whatever the price of the car was, you'd have to add $65,000 more to it.
Right.
Well, that's what everybody's doing, and it's not. We don't do that. We never do that. Never. The car is what it is. Here's all the bits and pieces. Here's the labor. Here's what we're looking at for warranty, sales. All that other stuff gets rolled in, and then you say, boom, here's the price. What about the investment? The investment is the investment. Here's what the prices are. And when we hit this many vehicles, then we'll be making profit. but we have to pay it off. But right now, that's what we can sell it for. But they're not doing that. So they're saying, things like each Ford product is losing $50,000. Well, you know what? I look at now that the Bolt is like paid off everything.
Mhm.
Oh, now they can sell it for, what is it, 36 grand or something like that?
Way less, 28 grand base price.
Well,
But they don't want to. I don't know.
Because it's not on the Ultium and all
Yeah.
the stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Well, here's the thing. They're going to try and get their money back fast on some of the Cadillac products. And that's the way you do it. You just charge them for the investment right up front, and then people just run away from it.
Yeah, that's going to be, well, that seems like that's going to be a tough game to play when you've got I've lost track of how many EV models are going to be in the marketplace in 2024. In the United States, forget about China. China's double whatever number there would be in the United States.
I was reading this year there's 90 in the US.
90. So,
90 EVs.
yeah.
in
But
the
just,
US.
this idea of like, well, we can charge a premium because it's electric. I think that's pretty much out the window.
I think that it depends on who's charging. I think that Tesla
Well, actually,
can
it
charge
depends
whatever
on who's buying.
Yeah, and who's buying.
Because, look, the early attenders, they all jumped in, right? And they'd buy anything just to have an electric vehicle, especially a Tesla. And it looks like the market has pretty much sucked them in, at least in the US. And now there's another contingent out there that's interested in electrics, but they're not quite ready to pull the trigger.
Well, here's the deal. The thing that's going to make it happen is if, you guys start putting across the benefit of having electric. When I had my Rubicon, I was paying $250 a month for gas.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a Rivian. How much for electricity? $11. I had to have oil changes, and I had to have air filter changes, and every once
How are
in a
your
while,
tires?
my tires go forever. It's unbelievable. The
'Cause
tires,
I've heard
the
of Rivian
brakes,
people saying 10,000, 12,000 miles, they're replacing tires.
Because the vehicle's so heavy.
I don't know if it's
I
just
can't
that. I think
believe
it's
it.
people mashing the pedal. And
Oh,
That's
no.
what I.
Yeah.
But it's not just mashing.
That's a
it.
choice. That's a consumer
here's
They're
choice.
not
here's
used
the
to a
deal.
truck going 0 to 60 in 3.5,
Yeah,
4 seconds.
Neither am
yeah.
I. I've tried it. It's not. It's pretty.
At the end of the day,
It'll
if
nauseate
you if you're driving like a normal human being, the tires, the brakes, you never use. They don't.
The brakes you don't use, right?
There's
or,
a lot of fake news out there with
right.
tires
Yeah,
and different types of pollution.
But
and stuff like
the
that.
tires thing on electric cars, I can tell you from listening to the tire companies, it's an issue.
Well, I don't know. I can only tell you what's
What your experience
My
is,
my
right.
experience is the tire wear is like, I can't believe it. There's no tire wear. The brakes look like brand spanking new because I drive with one pedal. I never hit the brakes. Never. If you hit the brakes and you grab the wheel, you're going to get
But there's two problems with electrics right now: insurance and residuals.
Oh yeah.
Because the residuals, I don't know about Teslas, what their residual value is. If you go online and look at the used prices, I don't believe them because in many cases they're higher than new, and it's like, who's going to buy a new or a used Tesla for more money than a new one? So I don't buy that.
So you
stuff.
can get it.
But I can tell you, especially all the compliance cars, oh my God, they're sales proof. They're nailed to the showroom floor. You can't get rid of them. And insurance costs. It looks right now, and I'm not going to say it's for every single one, it costs more to repair an electric vehicle for a bunch of reasons, right? There's not that many parts out there, not that many people to work on them, blah, 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 blah. But those are the two problems that I see right now for electrics in the market: insurance and residuals.
Well, most of the company, okay, so if you buy a Rivian, they provide an insurance company to work with, and it was no more expensive than when I had the Rubicon. If you get into an accident, I just did. The biggest problem is waiting for the parts.
Yeah, right.
That is killer, and that pisses that kind of like pisses
Okay,
you off.
well, as long as you mentioned accidents, we had a viewer write into me, Roger Taketo. Hope I didn't butcher your name there. How hard is a Cybertruck going to be to repair in fender benders?
Their fenders don't bend.
Yeah.
Well, everything bends.
It's
you hit
the
it
other
hard
guy
enough.
who's going to have the problem.
Yeah.
I watched the I watched the videos that
Yeah.
they had.
The
T-bone,
IHS.
all the stuff. They broke the sorb machine. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to take quite a bit. Even a machine gun has a hard time with a Cybertruck.
That was pretty
But I
impressive.
watched the one where the T-bone came in. It went bang, hit the door. The door went like that for a second, and then it went pop. It's martensite. Martensite isn't.
So explain that. What the hell's martensite?
Okay, so all stainless steels start off usually as austenitic,
Which means what?
Which means that it's non-magnetic and it's body center cubic. So body center.
I wouldn't
cubic,
even ask you what that.
Okay, so that's an allotropy. So the allotropy, okay, is different, and it basically it's firm. It's really tight because there's things inside. Main ingredients being nickel and chromium.
So
okay?
martensite means really, really hard.
Martensite, I didn't even know. I took 4 years at Tech, the school high school I went to of metallurgy, and 2 more years when I went to college. I thought I'd be a metallurgist. I like the idea of all this, but it stinks and give me a headache. So that was the end of that. But I know a fair amount. Okay, I'm not the expert anymore, but I know a fair amount. And when I was a kid, you couldn't take an austenitic material and turn it into martensite unless you work hardened it. And they didn't tell us that this thing was martensitic until I went on a tour. And then I said, what does that thing do over there? And he says, oh, well, that's cold forming that we use. Cold forming for what? Well, it changes the allotropy a little. Can you make martensite out of this? I'm not sure I want to answer that question. And now when you look at normal stainless steel, it looks like blobs. But when you look at martensite, it looks like
you mean under the microscope?
Under the microscope, yeah. It looks totally different. It looks like giant things that have come together somehow. They look like
it's a chemical reaction when the steel is liquid.
The chemical reaction is when you heat it up and you run it through and quench it at whatever temperature it needs to quench in order to make austenitic materials. You have to quench it fast enough so that the metals that are you want to bond into, you have to make it fast enough so that the outside cubic holds that whatever the chemical is that, or whatever the additive or agent that you want to keep in it, it has to close up on it fast enough. And that's when you have stainless steel. And the things you add are, like I say, there's a whole bunch of things, but in essence, the ones that really make things happen are nickel and chromium. So that's kind of like normal stainless steel. Now, when you want to have austenitic stainless steel, things change quite a bit. And it's not my first choice. But if you work harden it, if you can work harden it and on the line, I mean, they're uncoiling it over here, and it comes out, and I see it dip down, and it comes back up, and it goes into this. What are you doing there? Because I don't recognize that machine, and I know most of the machines that you use on a stamping line. That one, I don't know what it is. And so what they're doing is they're work hardening the steel, and it comes together, and it's martensitic.
It seems like an awful lot of work to do for a niche product. Like
you want to have machine gun bullets bounce off? Martensite.
Yeah.
You want to have it go through like butter? Stay with austenite. Right. I mean,
they've invested a lot to do this.
Well, it all boils down to Elon's son, right? He said, if this is a future vehicle, how come it doesn't look like the future? And then they showed all the pickup trucks, one after another. They all look identical.
I also think that they're a $700 billion company right now.
Yeah.
Right? So the decisions that they make are on a different scale.
800 billion.
800. Sorry. Yeah. And John, who would have thought we'd have had a chemistry lesson?
Yeah.
Auto line after hours.
Right.
I am here now. Well, and we're going to talk about space allotropy. You should really have an expert.
Right. Yeah. Oh God.
But anyway, you're saying
education over again. But anyway.
No, I just think that those types of decisions, and if he's still thinking about that 20 million by 2030 or getting close to it, then he's got to make these types of decisions because, again, he's also thinking more like a technology company, software engineering company than a traditional car company, right? So,
but to me, it doesn't seem that complicated. I mean, if you're unrolling the coil, right, and you're doing the processing right there, and they laser cut the blanks, or what do they do? They laser cut them, then they form them. Done.
Yeah, and quite frankly,
No
the
paint?
forming, no paint, and that's they do have paint in other areas, but the big thing for me was the forming. How do I bend that stuff without bruising it? And they've got a machine that Trump built, and they call it air bending. It looks like a normal brake, but they've got something that's helping it out so that you don't get a bruise.
So when you say bruise, I mean you're saying you want a clean bend without any ripples and stuff.
If you bend normal material in a brake, it goes down, and you have a line. Okay, it's a if you put your fingers on it and rub it, you can feel that
it's like a crease.
It's a crease, but you can feel that there's little broken
Uneven?
parts.
Got it.
Parts of steel there. With this stuff, there's nothing. So I put my hands all over this stuff, and how do they do that? And they showed me the machine. So it comes rolling out. It gets it goes through that process, and then to make it into work hardened austenite martensite, and then it goes in a machine and goes, and it's done, and it's fast, and it's easy, and it's all robotic.
So the fascinating thing about this, I was just going to say, I mean, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or whatever, I would not have said Tesla is going to be a leader in manufacturing process. And like the people we talk about the Tesla production system, the stuff you're talking about says that they are becoming that they're ahead in a lot of manufacturing process stuff.
They spend an awful lot of money, a tremendous amount of money on R&D for manufacturing and material science. And if you don't invest in material science and you don't invest in manufacturing and you don't invest in software, you are screwed. You're not going to win. You can't win. I don't care about wow, look at that dazzling paint. Or let's put little LEDs that change color all the time. That, to me, is just bullshit. It's just a waste of time.
And this is what I was talking about with Apple, right? Because in the front end, they spend a ton of money in R&D, and they don't trust their suppliers to build to spec on the capital equipment, right? And so they teach them how to do it. They have employees there that are at the facilities when the capital equipment gets delivered. They'll sit there, they'll sleep there until they can get to, production mass quantity units, and then they'll go. So, it's just different relative to the automotive traditional legacy stuff. So,
okay, hold on one sec. We got to take a quick break. We got to give a shout out to our great sponsor, Bridgestone, that makes the show possible.
How do Bridgestone tires stop shorter on wet roads? It's their HydroTrack technology. But you don't have to know how the science works, just where the brake is. What really matters is their Bridgestone.
All right, we're back. We're talking about, we're talking about everything here.
chemistry.
Site stainless steel.
So I know you wanted to get into China.
Yeah, I do. I do. And I guess directors sit both too, and Sandy. So we spent the first half hour talking about Tesla. My question is, so meanwhile in China, there's this whole gaggle of companies that are pretty innovative, one or two of which are making money. I mean, I'm just sort of curious. So, what's happening in China relative to what we see? I mean, are Chinese electric vehicle companies in the same ball game as Tesla, or are they in a different ball game? And what's going on with that?
So I would say it's BYD, Tesla, and then everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Really? You wouldn't put Li Auto or Neo closer?
I would. This month, Li Auto should get to about 15,000 units for December sales. So everyone else is around 10, 20. And I was mentioning before the show that Volkswagen Group sent out a tweet saying they were at like 23,000 units in November. That's over 6 or 7 or 8 models. So even the legacies are struggling mightily because we're talking about a base of between 8 and 9 million vehicles for NEVs this year. Mm-hmm. BYD probably won't outsell Tesla on the BEV side, but they're going to be the number one brand in China.
But they'll outsell Tesla in China with BEVs.
Yes,
No,
yes.
you're talking globally. They will
Yeah.
not outsell Tesla, but in China they will.
Right. So
And already are.
yeah. So BYD globally with PHEVs and BEVs probably around 332 million. I think Tesla's probably going to hit around 1.8 with 45%, 50% of the production coming out of Shanghai Giga, 150,000 units being exported, and then the rest domestic consumption. So, but that being said, there are just a gaggle of Chinese EV brands that are fighting each other because of the price war. And that's why we're seeing this huge increase in exports. Now, the lion's share is still ICE vehicles, from SAIC with MG.
It's like 60,
stuff
60,
like that.
70%, right? 70% is ICE and 30%. But those numbers are
Changing
changing
rapidly.
right?
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
government's got its foot on the
Well,
pedal.
and within the next 3 years is going to be foreign brands that are shipping Chinese-made EVs with their logos on them to Europe.
Yeah.
So I think we should note the two notable companies are going to be Volkswagen and Stellantis, right? Because they had major deals with Chinese EV companies. And you make a great point, Li Auto, because there's 3 publicly traded, U.S. traded Chinese EV companies: NIO, Li Auto, and XPeng. XPeng, their valuation got reduced substantially because Alibaba sold a bunch of their shares. NIO is the premium brand that has made swapping a thing in China. And then Li Auto is domestic only with EREVs. They have 3 products. They all kind of look alike if you squint, but they're family SUV crossovers. And again, as XPeng and NIO struggle to get to 20,000 units a month, December will be probably around 55,000 unit for Li Auto. And market cap wise, they're double NIO and XPeng right now. So yeah.
So my question would be, BYD seems like a monster. I've said if they keep this rate of growth going, sometime in the next decade, they'll be the biggest car company in the world.
That's my prediction as well. And when I talked to, when I talked to Elon Musk, I said, I think that Tesla's going to be a rock solid second, but I think BYD is going to be in first. And he said, you're probably right. And he doesn't mince words.
But here's my question then: is BYD technically where Tesla is? Is it software defined? Is it centralized zonal computing? Is it Ethernet? Is it gigacastings? Is it all that kind of stuff?
It is not.
No.
But they have invested in expansion. So over the last 2 years, they've entered like 60 markets.
Right.
And they have the Seal, they have the UN Plus, they have the Dolphin, and then the Seagull, all under $30,000. So where exporting to Europe or the United States eventually, or North America, for those products, it'll take some time because the BYD brand, creating awareness, education, and trust. The reason it makes so much sense for these Chinese brands to enter Mexico, either to produce, is not just because entry into North America. It's also because they can sell domestically into Latin America and South America at that $20,000 price point. So,
well, I think, and this is a moment when I'll bring up the word tariffs, because there was just a story this morning that the Biden administration, I can't remember who wrote it, but somebody had a story. The Biden administration is looking at raising the tariffs on Chinese vehicles. I can't remember, what is it now, like 20%?
25.
27.5. So it's
Okay.
2.5
So that's not
for
high enough,
everything,
apparently.
and then 25 for Chinese.
And the European Union is growling about dumping and whatnot and unfair trade. I mean, what is a company like BYD? I mean, it's kind of like Back to the Future, right? This is what the Japanese were in the 1980s.
Exactly.
So
right.
What happens next?
Well, what happened with the Japanese? We rolled over and let them in. And why was that? Because nobody in North America could give the consumer what they wanted. They wanted a small car. It had to be fuel efficient, and they wanted high quality. Well, buy a XYZ car.
Yeah.
It's made in America. Wave the flag. it's a made in America. Wave the flag. It's me. And it didn't work out. So we put tariffs on it. We did this, we did that. Eventually, somebody said, well, because people, they still bought them. And quite frankly, if they're coming in from China, labor rates in China are a whole lot lower than they are anywhere. And the cars are really good. I mean, I spent from
really good right now.
Right
So
now.
I think, sorry to interrupt, but just really quickly, the Japanese and Koreans took years to get
Well,
to.
the Koreans did, but the Japanese, it didn't take them long to catch on. That they had the right market. They had the California market,
Sure.
and that was it. They everything else got crushed after they started coming.
Yeah, I was thinking about this too. I mean, the idea that whatever it is the Chinese companies do to make electric vehicles affordable at BYD makes money. I don't know about the rest of them, but BYD makes money.
BYD
They make money, so they know how to do a profitable electric vehicle at that sort of people's price point of 25,000, 30,000. I guess the idea that they won't be able to transfer that to other markets, that seems like a fallacy because the Japanese did it.
Exactly right. This is okay. BYD is already building buses right here in the U.S. Not in the not too distant future. They're going to be building and selling Class 8 kind of tractors here in the United States. They have battery factories right here in the United States.
They don't deal with chip problems?
They don't. No, because why? Well, let's see. Oh yeah, they make chips. Oh yeah, they make batteries. Oh yeah, they make their own circuit boards. Yeah, on and on and on. Everybody from Harvard, wow, you got to outsource. They didn't. Neither did Tesla. Who's going to win? I mean, this is so elemental, and it's so obvious to anybody, but those people who say, well, we could save a penny if that isn't what's going to make you wealthy. It's not going to get you to a prestige kind of product.
I think what BYD will probably end up doing, especially if the tariffs go up, build a CKD plant in the United States. Knock down, you bring in the parts from China, you use American labor, you call it American made.
In India right now.
And they might do it through Mexico too.
And they're also doing it through Canada.
So they may not get the $7,500 EV rebate. Who knows how long that's going to last anyway. But I think that they'll be able to subvert the tariff by building in America. And remember, that's what the Japanese did. Remember, Reagan came out,
that's
President Reagan, voluntary restraint agreement, and they said, okay, baby, we'll build there.
I started covering the auto industry when the voluntary restraint agreements were still in force. And that's why I asked these questions, because it seems to me like history is going to repeat itself here.
Absolutely. This is so obvious. It isn't even funny. And yet I see all these characters pounding on tables, getting all red in the face. Come off it. It's not going to work. You can't do it. All the Chinese have to do is say, oh, you need some lithium. No, I don't think so.
They kind of did. They're doing that as we speak.
But I think it goes beyond that, because it's not about EVs anymore. It's about software.
Yeah.
So even if the manufacturers here, US3, Volkswagen, Stellantis, can build an affordable EV, who wants it if the infotainment system is super buggy and latency is not great because we're so used to the iPhone? And right now the decision is make buy, and guess what? Volkswagen's buying, Stellantis is buying, GM kicked CarPlay out, but now we're seeing a bunch of problems with the lyrics. So I mean, there's challenges ahead, and they just don't have the horses in-house to really create that competency long term, and that's where Tesla.
Yeah, and it's not just infotainment. That's what the customer sees. It's
No,
also the
that's-
management of the
here's-
vehicle
here's the
itself,
thing.
right?
Each one of those little black boxes that are stuck inside of a North American car, each one of them has their own software. The software is owned by somebody else. They'll give you communication from that little black box to whatever you want to communicate with. They'll allow you a handshake, but you don't know what's in that box. You don't know whether that little box is going to do what you want it to do, and you're stuck.
You can't
You're
change
stuck,
it, right?
and there's
If you're the
140 of those little boxes, and each one of them has a different software, and each
and
one of those
firmware
softwares
that they need to talk to each other.
So we'll see what happens at Ford, because Doug Field has talked about this at the the Capital Markets Day.
Right, no,
you
I
were at
remember
that,
it well.
right?
Yes.
Dumped all the parts on the
yeah.
floor and said, suppliers write the software for all those components.
Right.
Not going forward, they don't.
Yeah.
But can Ford pull it off? Can any of the legacies? Because you're saying too, they just don't have the software horsepower.
Volkswagen
it
hasn't been
depends
able
on
to
where
do it.
you get the software done as well, because you had a guy in Germany that hired 20,000 software engineers, and that's not a place where you hire 20,000 software
No, it is
engineers.
not.
You go to Silicon Valley, and who does that, or who did that? Well, the Chinese did. They came in, they sent their people to Stanford, because I used to teach there, and I'm telling you what, there was lots of Chinese people in there. I didn't teach software, but they were the class that were either in before me or after me. And so I'm gathering my shit up, and these other guys are coming in. Everybody's Chinese. Everybody. I couldn't believe it's a master's course. I couldn't believe how many Chinese people were there. When I went to China, when I went to teach them how to design using our packages and whatnot, and as in essence, all we did was talk about electric vehicles and how do you make it lighter and how do you get better coefficient of drag and how do I get rid of friction and all these different things. They were soaking it up like sponges, and everybody back, well, you know what we need is a big V8. And okay, so we spent from 2014 to 2019. Actually, it was 2020 when Trump said, nobody could do any business with China. And if you're going to do something like that, well, we're just going to come and throw you in jail or something. I don't remember who the exact amount was, but I do know that I lost $4 million. $4 million in purchase orders
Because you were not
instantly
able to
because I was
work
not
with- work with
I
Chinese
couldn't work with
customers.
China
And
anymore.
then there was a conference a few months ago, a Fortune conference, where they had a couple of head of designs for GAC and GU, which is the Baidu Geely joint venture,
Yeah.
who happens to be Frank Wu, who studied at CCS, worked at General Motors for about 8 years before moving to China. So it's not just Chinese, but it's a culture, it's a kind of a mindset, and they said their teams are looking at every 6 months refreshing software
Yeah.
to update features. So that's unheard of because as we all know, a product life cycle for a traditional automotive is 5 years, right? 500,000 units, whatever.
Yeah.
So all those policies and procedures need to be thrown out. You can't evolve. Even if they were to create efficiencies, it might be 7, 10%, 12%, but we're talking 6 months. They're coming out with brand new features. And so, I mean, this is a culture thing. I mean, it's up and down. It's not just a component here or a component there. And in the United States, Tesla is by far ahead, right? Because
Yeah, in China, it's not as clear. I mean, I think I agree with the way you ranked it. BYD, Tesla, that makes sense. I mean, that's hierarchy. But it does seem like we, I guess that it does seem like both of you are saying is we're at a technology kind of turning point that seems like maybe you could compare it to the 70s and 80s when you had Toyota Production System meets highly efficient vehicle engineering. Maybe it's even before that, but it seems like that's what we're dealing with. It's not just like evolutionary stuff.
No, this has to be revolutionary, and quite frankly, the biggest changes that have to happen are corporate changes. The corporate procedures, all the corporate culture, all that stuff has to change. You can't have it anymore. It changed
Can you
slowly.
change corporate culture?
It's the toughest thing on the planet to do, and usually
That's why
what
I'm
winds up
asking.
happening-
I mean, you're almost better just blowing up a company and starting a new one.
Maybe, but remember, we used to have all the corporations used to build their own stuff. They made their own seats. They made their own instrument panels. They did all this stuff. Slowly, the consultants came in and, that should be offshore. Oh, you should give that away. Oh, look at how much we saved here. Oh, look at how much we saved there.
The UAW played a big role in that.
And
it
they
was
did.
all of a sudden way cheaper to buy from suppliers. And that's something that Sean Fain at the UAW has never fessed up to. They're part of the problem.
Hey, you know what?
And I'm not against these people getting money, but it goes beyond the money. It's work rules, it's lines of demarcation, it's battles in the factory, and all that kind of stuff.
Telling the company what they're going to do from,
why did they agree to that?
I have any idea, but I do remember for 2 years. So I came from the machine tool industry initially. I was a tool maker. Then later on, I worked my way into engineering and went to school and stuff like that. at 27, I was a chief engineer of Valiant Machine Tool, and that was a big place. Biggest, the biggest machine tool company privately held machine tool company in North America. And I'm telling you what, when when the union made the rule that they didn't want any robots, we were in the tank. I mean, it's the only time that we were. So what do? We automated, I think it was a typewriter thing we did. We were working, we got a great big giant contract for the Karma River project in Russia. I mean, we were doing anything to just keep the doors open. And why? Well, the union says we don't want to have any robots. We want a union strong. 1.5 million people used to be in, or actually, I think it was quite a bit. I think it was about 1.5 million. We're in the union. And now we have less than 300,000. I'm telling you what, you tell the customer what he wants to do, what he should be doing. Hey, you got to do it my way. You're the customer, but you got to do it my way. And sooner or later, the customer is going to say, I don't think so. And the next thing you know, you go from, what did GM have, like 50 or 60% down to, what are they now, 13, 14%?
16%, I think.
16%?
Something like that.
Well, at the end of the day, other people will come in because you wanted to tell them what to do. They found somebody else that wants to give them what they want. And guess what? That's when the consumer moves.
And I do think that's going to be that's going to be a real challenge for the policymakers of the Western world, the EU and the United States. And Carlos Tavares talks about this. I stole this from him. I'll give him the credit. He said, what are you going to do when you want everybody to drive an electric vehicle? And the only way to make that happen is to have electric vehicles that anybody can buy, which is, the amazing $25,000 car. And right now, it seems like the only people who could deliver that in a competent way are Chinese manufacturers.
Correct.
So in China, I want to say 90% of all cars sold are under 300,000 RMB or $45,000 basically.
Okay.
And if we probably drilled down, it would probably be under 30,000.
Mm-hmm. But here's the question too: who's making money?
Well,
BYD. I ran out of companies.
Geely's making.
No,
money.
I'm on EVs. I'm talking about. Is Geely making money on EVs? I doubt it.
Don't think so.
BYD, we know for a fact is. I'm not sure anybody else in China is making money, profit.
So the never-ending price war really has gone a lot longer than most people think. Kind of exacerbated by Tesla a little bit. But they're also looking at year end, so they're trying to pull in sales from early 2024 when there's still a bit of uncertainty in the economy. And I think in 2024, mid 2024, end of 2024, we'll start to see some of these brands kind of tail off a little bit. But the crazy thing is there's still new products, there's still new brands. BYD just launched 2 new brands, right? And they're in the luxuries. Neo is going to go down market.
I swear to God, every single day, I'm not exaggerating here, every single day there's a new EV hitting the market in China.
Yeah.
And it's nuts. And here's the problem that I see coming for China is, okay, there's a bunch of little independent companies. They're not going to make it. The big ones, the state-owned ones, are going to get propped up no matter what the hell happens. It won't matter if they're losing money because they represent jobs and the government's not going to let those jobs go away.
And then the losers are going to be the foreign brands.
Totally, completely.
Well, so
right?
I wonder.
That's a lot of their own doing, but also you're going to see a pressure release valve into Latin America, into South America,
Exports
into Southeast
foreign
Asia.
brands will export or try to export into these other markets.
So,
but how long before those markets get flooded?
Right,
Not
right.
very long.
Yeah, so
They're not that big.
So what will happen is, and it's already starting to happen, China in the lower tier cities are investing much more in charging infrastructure. For example, Neo is building more swapping stations in the lower tier cities. And we have to remember that a small city in China is still probably 7-8 million people.
Yeah.
So
it's a tier 3 city or whatever they call it.
So
No airport for you.
Or only 4.
Yeah, exactly. So we're at 15.5 million cars this year, I think, sold
Something like
in
that.
US, and I think China will be around 25.
Yeah.
So and China's still growing because the lower tier cities where we're pretty flat. But yes, it's a huge concern, not only because of overcapacity, but it's going to be exacerbated if the EU creates their own Inflation Reduction Act, because now we have battery capacity in the United States, in Europe, and in China, and that money's still getting plowed into.
Yeah.
And
But that's where the world seems to be headed. Is you have the EU, the United States, and China as kind of with their own, at least in theory, their own separate, isolated EV infrastructures. I mean, that's what the European and the United States governments seem to want, right?
well,
That's the policy direction they want to go in.
absolutely.
I'm not
why I
saying I
think-
think that's
that's why
going to
it's
work. I'm just
interesting.
telling you I think that's what they want.
that's why it's interesting, to be a fly on the wall when the U.S. government is talking to Mexico about foreign direct investment, because I guarantee you the governor of Alabama or Mississippi's like, give me that money, right? Or down south where it's less UAW friendly. So that's going to be kind of the dichotomy for just the United States in 2024, right? Because these are paying jobs, right? And we know that the Chinese want to come in with battery cell factories and EVs because Ford and CATL are doing a partnership, right? So that's one example. And it just depends. You had made a great point, I think, 2 weeks ago at a conference that you were at. I was like, stop calling them hybrids. Just say they get 50 miles to the gallon and people will buy them, right? So if we stop until the end of 2024, it's going to be easy and popular to bash China on the left and the right. But they're going to sit on the sidelines for the most part until they figure out, okay, who's going to be the next president. And then they're going to move forward.
And what do we have to say to get what we want?
Exactly right. And the reason that's the truth is because, and I've said this a lot of times, and people really hate it, but I like saying it. Americans are checker players, and China, if they didn't invent chess, they came damn close to it. I'm telling you what, these guys got a long range plan. There's the what is it? The 1,000-year marathon or something, that book that came out, the Chinese business plan. When I started hearing about that, the 10-year plan to go from basically agrarian to top of the line and everything, these guys got a plan. We have debates, right?
But I'll say this, when the Civil War breaks out in China, we're all going to go, huh.
You've been watching too much disaster television there, John.
I think they already have their own little civil war.
I've heard the same thing. Toyota's got a 100-year plan. Look, we have no clue what the hell's going to happen in 5 years.
Exactly. But here's the thing. I almost got a chance to see that. I almost got a chance to see that 100-year plan. And guess what?
What?
One of the executives that was at the table with E.G. Toyota, he started laughing. And he said, why would you ever have a 100-year plan? Your grandchildren will be dead by then. It's the ridiculous idea. And E.G. turned around and said something to the guy in Japanese. And I asked my interpreter, what did he just say? And she said, nothing. It doesn't matter. I said, what did he say? And he said, where there's arrogance, there's opportunity.
Yeah.
That's
very good insight.
Words to live
That's
by.
very good insight. But I think the better thing to do as a company or as a country is be very agile. It's the old Mike Tyson line. Everybody's got a plan, but until they step in the ring and get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And, 3-4 years ago, I was saying I loved GM's EV strategy. I thought it was brilliant. I still think the strategy is great, but guess what? People aren't buying EVs like they thought that they would.
No.
So you better be able to adjust on a dime. You can have the 100-year plan, but when you get punched in the mouth, you better have the agility to adjust.
And I'd said this to a friend, journalist, and he kind of laughed, but he was like nodding his head laughing. He was like, to me, it's much easier for a technology company to build a car than it is for an automaker to become a technology.
So true.
Exactly right. That is
Yeah,
exactly right.
there's
And
been no
that's
lack
why
of trying in the last 30 years. I mean, GM has tried to become a technology company 2 or 3 times at least.
It's impossible. Everything's on
hard.
the cheap. The number one rule is how cheap can we get it? And as long as you say how cheap can we get it, you can't develop software.
Well,
It
here's
just doesn't work.
here's an example of the importance or the misunderstanding or the lack of understanding. For the longest time, I don't know if they still do, but for the longest time, sourcing guys on the indirect side would buy the batteries. And we now know that it's very strategic, and we need to buy rare earth metals. We need, so that, and then silicon, right? Chips.
The whole supply chain.
Yeah. So that's indirect. That's on the IT guys need to do that. And it's like, what?
Well, we learned the hard way. That's not true.
And on the BOM, is software accounted for on the BOM? Because it's a product cost now, right? It's not this indirect cost, right?
I never thought of that. Do you know, Sandy?
No.
Software is not on the BOM. For those who don't know, BOM, B-O-M, bill of materials.
C-BOM.
All the parts that go into a car.
Yeah. But the software, I mean, this is a whole nother show, and I know we're supposed to wrap up soon.
I know.
But the software content is going vertical in terms of the.
It has been going vertical since the 70s. I mean, really and truly, it swoops up like a hockey stick, and now it's almost straight up and down. If you don't know what you're doing in software, and just like what Doug said, if we allow everyone else to tell us what to do in their little software box, we can never compete. And when I tell people, Tesla's 10 years ahead in software. Oh, that can't be correct. Well, you did. All right, go get bashed in the face as
punched in the mouth.
One of the shrewd moves that Mary made was kick Apple out of GM vehicles, right? The CarPlay.
Well, we'll see if the customers go along with her on that one.
Well, long term, I think it was a prudent move because so a friend of mine, that same friend at Porsche in Atlanta, sends me a picture of the next version of CarPlay in a Porsche, and no one's going to want Porsche or Cariad software.
No, right. No.
Once
they
see
that's real estate they've lost.
IP and the info, and it's data that they've lost, right?
Okay, we're going to have to cut it short right now, but I'm going to have you guys back. This was a great conversation, great show. We're going to do it again.
That'd be great.
But want to thank you all for being on. I want you all to have a great holiday. Merry Christmas.
Oh,
Fantastic.
Merry Christmas.
Look to all.
I've got something for you. Here you go.
Nice.
I'll even partly open
Christmas
it.
came early.
Yes.
A present from Sandy. Santa Sandy. Look at that.
Festive.
This is cool.
That's what,
It's a Cybertruck cutout, and it looks like it's a church key.
It is.
It's a bottle
It's a bottle opener,
Yeah.
and it says it's Elon time on the back.
There you go.
That's great. Thanks, Andy.
It's 2:00 in the morning somewhere.
That's probably going to be one of your best Christmas presents.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's
That's
right.
get the most
That's the
use.
Jimmy Buffett song he never wrote.
That's right.
It's 2:00 somewhere a.m.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, you guys, and thank all of you for having tuned in.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.